place is nowhere. And it's forever.
Ghosts of my life.
Over London, Lucifer.
Yeah, that's a Jermaine line if I've ever heard.
Great anarch and monarch of naught, the flight of Lucifer. Over London, my little grandson, wrinkled sunny forehead, all tiny blue pain, the mother blood emerges, then the mother grief.
We are back for our final episode in season 1. We made it, everyone. That was Lucifer Over London by Current 93.
Watch as we try and talk about everything except this movie.
We are Lost Futures, a Mark Fisher podcast, in our final episode, and I'm Steven.
I'm Marlo.
And we are doing Tremors of an Imperceptible Future, Patrick Keeler's Robinson and Ruins, an essay from Sight and Sound, a very prestigious
British publication. They put out a top 10 movie list every year and then people fight over it.
Why do they fight over it?
Because it becomes a race to did you just watch that movie because it was on the Sight and Sound list like a poser, or is it a movie that you saw because you're already a smart person who watches good fucking French movies from the 70s and 60s.
So it's a pretentious...
Yeah, there's a bit of pretension about it. And then there's they'll put fucking Sad Frenchman movie number 3 down from 6th to 8th, and then people get angry and shit. It's a whole fucking thing. But yeah, no, it's a very prestigious film publication from England. That I'm just shitting on because I'm an anti-intellectual.
Marlo, noted anti-intellectual in our finale.
I'm a populist.
Marlo is a populist. Okay. You heard it here first.
Give me fucking the AV Club and a 6-pack of beers any day.
The AV Club.
Give me Rotten Tomatoes and
give me
some Skull fucking mint pouches.
Marlo is a firm believer in the red letter media universe of film criticism.
Yeah, you should only criticize shitty Marvel movies that you already were going to hate, and we know that already. And then fucking other shitty movies that are at least sort of fun to watch, but it's also just a guy making a workout video for 70-year-olds in 1989.
Well, sometimes they do weirdo French film. Remember the one that they did about the...
Well, yeah, they have the review.
They did the one about the car.
Anyway. Well, it's been fun remembering old episodes of Red Letter Media. Thanks for joining us.
Titan, where a woman goes into a car and it's implied she fucks the car.
Okay.
It actually fits into the theme of this episode.
Masturbation.
No, nature versus non-nature.
Oh, God, yeah, I guess. Fuck, I hated this
and
shit.
Frankenstein. What's Robinson and Ruins?
Okay, well, actually, it starts out with a short story that is not Robinson and Ruins. So let's talk about that.
This is our continuous deferral of... not talking about this video essay that we watched about an hour of before
video
shutting off.
Essay is giving it too much credit.
He calls it a video essay.
Yeah, okay. He starts all talking about the Ellis Sharp's short story, The Haywain, which is also named after a painting called The Haywain.
Yep.
In The Haywain, it takes place in the year 1990. And at the time, Margaret Thatcher is doing a thing that's going to eventually lose her the leadership of the Conservative Party. She decided to implement a poll tax. A poll tax, for you Americans, is not a tax on voting. That is a different thing that is also called a poll tax that occurred. Specifically, it wasn't really a thing generally until Reconstruction America. needed to get like creative about being racist. So anyway, poll tax in the historical usage, literally it means a head tax, i.e. a set amount of money being taxed on each person who needs to pay taxes. So each adult person pay like $100. That's your taxes. It's not based on income. It's not based on anything else. Obviously, it hurts the poor more than the rich. It is, in fact, a thing that was, by the Founding Fathers, made illegal in the United States Constitution.
Yeah, because we don't do that monarchy tax.
Right. It was like always
people.
seen by like your Enlightenment guys who read Adam Smith as like a particularly pernicious sort of tax.
It's authoritarianism is what it is. It's the overreach by the government.
To be clear, this is absolutely just grabbing property from the bottom up. Like,
don't tread on me.
This is just like...
This is the don't tread on me.
Well, I mean, yeah, this is just to be clear, like, you know, I'm not saying that these arguments are wrong. It is, in fact, like, one of the most egregious forms of a tax that obviously hurts the poor more than the rich. Like, in a very clear way. So anyway, Margaret Thatcher decided to do that in 1990. Hugely unpopular, led to widespread riots. Probably, I'm pretty sure it's cited as one of the main reasons that she then lost the leadership. So the Haywain takes place during this. And in this, a rioter during the poll tax protests finds his way into a museum, sees this old English pastoral painting, and he has this realization of class solidarity with the subjects of the painting, these agricultural workers, in this scene that is like typically depicted as pastoral, peaceful, trans politics. He realizes in this moment that this is a scene of great political strife and labor strife, and as he's realizing this, a police officer bashes him on the head with a billy club. And apparently that's how the story ends. Starts out with this, and then we get into the film.
Yeah, the painting is The Haywain by John Constable. It was painted in 1821.
It's a picture of a big, beautiful farm landscape and some little guys doing farm work. Sure, you can imagine what this painting might look like. It looks like that. You can also Google it.
Google it.
But it also looks exactly like what you'd think this painting.
It is interesting how he uses this to kind of set up his argument, because all of this he's always noting is the landscape. The English landscape is a site of political struggle.
Sure.
Far from being some refuge from political strife, the English landscape is the site of numerous struggles between the forces of power and privilege and those who sought to resist them. Ellis Sharp, who wrote The Haywain, replaces the dominant pastoral image of the English countryside, not with a deflated quotidian realism, but with a different kind of lyricism, one colored by revolt. Fields and ditches, some hiding places or battlegrounds, landscapes that on the surface seem tranquil, still reverberate with an unavenged spectral rage of murderous working-class martyrs. When the poll tax rioter is clubbed by police and his blood starts to stain Constable's emblem of English nationhood, we're uncomfortably reminded of more recent episodes. And what recent episodes?
I don't think any specific. I think he's generally just... I mean, he could also be talking about America at this point. I mean, he's just saying, like, more... Oh, he was resisting arrest, right? We used minimal force. You know, just all the justifications for police brutality that commonly occur as of 2010.
Which kind of dovetails from our last episode about the Handsworth songs. This kind of nicely takes a turn into, oh, now we're doing two essays about riots, and he kind of like weaves the two in.
Well, this is one page that's on a short story on a riot. The movie, I don't think can be...
No, but he kind of, the way this book is that each essay kind of blends into the next, at least thematically.
Right.
So then we get into Robinson and Ruins, which Marlowe despises.
So remember that like movie we saw about that German guy who like wrote about walking around England? It's a lot like that.
Well, I thought it was a British guy.
No, I'm saying that the Steuerbacher.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot of movies in this that are these weird tiny indie films that are made about walking in England and thinking about stuff.
And this is
one of those.
Yeah, okay, now I remember. The Patience After Sebald.
Yeah, the Sebald book / documentary about Sebald / documentary about people bloomstaying Sebald.
The Rings of Saturn.
Right.
When he's
yes.
walking around.
Yeah, and then we have the one where it's walking around and, oh my god, it's a 28 Days Later situation, except without the zombies, but with thinking about stuff. And now we have this one.
Well, we also have Chris Petit's Content, which is also a film.
That's driving around and thinking about stuff. That's another twist on the genre. Yeah, there's a lot of these dinky little indie films that Mark is covering that's like, man, isn't suburban England kind of interesting?
Well, yeah, and to bring it all around, he also does he has the zine one, which is about like a space in the.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to call that. That's a zine about London by someone who's. Like,
but it is about the place.
Yeah, sure. I just think that's a little less specific than like specifically this like notion of I'm going to be moving around southern England and like waxing about Marx, which seems to come up a lot. So anyway, this is actually the third in a trilogy of films that all seem to be like this. The first one is London from, 92, 93?
Yeah, London, 94.
Then 97 is Robinson in Space. And then, 2010 is Robinson in Ruins. So these are, in fact, they're very much art house films. They are connected by this kind of threadbare plot.
Of an unnamed narrator. That's a big thing.
Of an unnamed narrator.
Who is walking around with Robinson.
Walking around England with Robinson thinking about stuff.
And what is he thinking about?
Like historical materialism, I guess.
Yeah. He's thinking about the birth of capitalism, of how different industries are created. When he looks at a thing, he says, here's an airplane field where things are, planes go off and they deliver things to Iraq and Afghanistan. He does that at one point. You look at another thing and it transports you into another historical moment.
It's a lot of.
Here's
in 1830, there was a revolution in France. Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's fine, I guess.
Well, you compared it a lot to Terrence Malick, and I think.
Okay, so that is. Particularly, so we only saw about half of the third one. Let's be clear. Yeah, so the third one in particular, this seems like particularly thematic of the third one. The third one, of course, made 2010. The other ones were the 90s, so global warming is a much more present concern for the third one. Well, so all of these movies, to be clear, are static camera shots with no subject. I mean, there might be, like, a guy walking past, and that might be, like, perhaps implied to be Robinson, or it might just be a guy who is walking past when they've set the camera up, and they don't ever, like, comment on that. There's no characters talking in the movie. This is all just the narrator with these static, mostly landscapes.
Landscapes. Yeah. Big on the landscapes.
Yeah. With no subject. But in the third one in particular, it will then do things where it will do the fucking Malick, let's zoom into a flower and hold that shot for 3 minutes. Or in this case, lichen, which becomes lichen, as the narrator pronounces it, which becomes this whole rigmarole, like fucking metaphorical idea of symbiosis, the idea of mutual aid through nature, kind of Kropotkin-y.
Okay, expand on that.
So, I mean, Kropotkin was, in fact, a famous anarcho-communist philosopher. Kropotkin, Peter Kropotkin, was by day a naturalist, a scientist of biology. You know, we're talking late 1800s, early 20th century. So it was a time where social Darwinism was in vogue as a particular,
Like the dominant.
as a philosophical stance to justify capitalism. And Kropotkin, you know, most famously wrote Mutual Aid, a Factor in Evolution, I believe, and some other shit that was specifically making a counter-argument to that from a naturalist perspective, arguing actually evolution did not imply this zero-sum competition, but that moving forward together was actually more of a mark of natural selection than not.
Mutual aid, a factor of evolution.
That kind of seems to be a thematic element of this movie. Again, plot-wise, in this case, it is like over 10 years after the last film came out.
Right, and they the thing that Mark Fisher points to and makes kind of a materialist critique of, or at least he links the politics of the 1992 election and 1997 election with London and Robinson in Space, where the general election of 1992 was supposed to end Tory rule.
Yeah, there were just a bunch of riots about this fucking poll tax. People hated the Tories.
Right, and Margaret Thatcher left and was
Margaret
replaced,
Thatcher was...
but the Tories maintained control with John Major being elected, and then in 1997, Tony Blair took over.
Yeah, I mean, Mark basically makes the idea that in neither case was there this full realization that Labour had been so captured by neoliberalism, because there just wasn't really the time to have that realization, but in the 2010 film, there was such time.
Well, it's addressing specifically post-Fordism, the service economy.
Post-2008,
economic
probably
collapse.
The main backdrop of this one. The introduction of global warming and the new kind of centering of ecological politics as suddenly an important thing.
And it kind of weaves this through in some beautiful passages. In the first two films, Robinson's interest was in the cities where capitalism was first built, and in the non-places where it now silently spreads, the distribution centers and container ports that are unvisited by practically anyone except Robinson and the narrator's companion, but which web Britain into the global market. And then in this new one, it looks at the service economy and post-Fordism, which only accelerated under the Blairite government. Yeah, he compares it then to Chris Petit's Content, another video essay that Marlowe loved.
About
with all
traveling
his heart.
through southern England and thinking about stuff.
The ruins which Robinson walks through here are partly the new ruins of a neoliberal culture that has not yet accepted its own demise, and which, for the moment, continues with the same old gestures like a zombie that does not know that it is dead. A thing that Mark Fisher constantly comes back to when he describes neoliberalism is zombies. He considers it to be an undead creature that keeps, no matter how much you shoot it, it'll keep coming back in a different form. Never quite dead, never quite alive. It also creates subjectivity that is zombie-like because people are made to work multiple jobs. They can't live with family. In general, his whole critique of alienation is further accelerated by neoliberalism and makes people into unthinking, unfeeling creatures that are taught not to think and feel.
Yeah.
He brings up Frederick Jameson. It seems to be easier for us to imagine the thoroughgoing deterioration of the earth and of nature than the breakdown of late capitalism.
I really want like a detailed explanation of exactly what the origin of that motherfucking quote is. Like, the end of the world or end. Like, was it originally this and then Zizek just like misquoted it as that? As the like better sounding one?
I've heard multiple origin accounts, and even in Capitalist Realism, he says it could have been Zizek or Jameson who cited that.
Yeah.
It is easier to imagine the end of capitalism
Or the end,
end of the world
than
than
the end of capitalism.
Right.
Or this much nerdier version that we have before us.
Yeah, the deterioration of the earth and of nature than the breakdown of late capitalism. Perhaps that is due to some weakness in our imaginations. And then he goes into green politics, which is something you were just touching on.
Right. Guess how many people mentioned in this essay believe that 9/11 was an inside job?
Okay, we need to discuss. He gets into environmental catastrophe, how green politics shapes political culture. At the beginning, it was a fringe movement, but now it's made even more centralized, and this filmmaker centers it within the narrative of Robinson in Ruins. He brings up Margaret Atwood's surfacing and says that Robinson may be headed into some kind of dark Deleuzian communion with nature. And then he starts discussing this in terms of like object-oriented ontology, right? There's a whole bunch of philosophers that he cites, as you say, one of whom, Lynn Margulis, an American biologist, who, along with James Lovelock, came up with, what was it, the Gaia
Hypothesis.
Gaia hypothesis.
Apparently they wrote some like kind of formalized scientific definition and proposal for the famed Gaia hypothesis, which, long story short, it's just what if the Earth was alive, and like understanding the Earth and natural systems as an organic set of processes. Super hippy-dippy shit.
Margulis and Lovelock are an interesting bunch. How much do you know of them?
Nothing.
Most people know just the Gaia hypothesis, I think, before they know the names of the people that...
Right, so apparently per Fisher, Margulis also sort of continued this like effort of trying to make arguments for at least cooperation, if not like communism, via evolutionary biology. Seems to be her thing. Also, she didn't think 9/11 happened. Also, she might not think AIDS is real.
Yeah,
So to be clear,
she wrote a paper
in the very early days of the AIDS pandemic, before we like understood that it was a virus, and then shortly after we concluded it was virus, there was some scientific dissent saying, "Oh, I don't think we at this time can definitively say it's
Yeah,
virus."
but she didn't say that at the time.
Right. She said this when?
2009.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, you know.
In 2009, Margulis and 7 others authored a position paper concerning research on the viability of round body forms of some spirochetes, syphilis, Lyme disease, and AIDS, resurgence of the great imitator, ? Which states that detailed research that correlates life histories of symbiotic spirochetes to change in the immune system of associated vertebrates is sorely needed, in urging the reinvestigation of the natural history of mammalian, tick-borne, and venereal transmission of spirochetes in relation to impairment of the human immune system. The paper went on to suggest that the possible direct causal involvement of spirochetes and their round bodies to symptoms of immune deficiency be carefully and vigorously investigated.
Anyway, this also isn't the film, but kind of fun to talk about. Yeah, the creator of this film cited her like as a person that kind of informed the sort of ecological the Maliki shit, as I've been calling it.
She's like the late 20th century version of Darwin within...
Darwin also think that Bush did 9/11?
Well, in terms of like her field of biology, she seems to be like a major figure putting forth theories about...
She's an evolutionary biologist who, like, also happens to be into some hippy-dippy shit.
Yeah, she basically is the biologist that supports loose change.
Yep.
She's, we're all referencing, Margolis argued that the September 11th attacks were a false flag operation, which had been used to justify the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, as well as unprecedented assaults on civil liberties. She claims that there were overwhelming evidence that the 3 buildings of the World Trade Center collapsed by controlled demolition.
It is just funny because I'm imagining how many times Richard Dawkins, like, angrily is adjusting his bow tie as he's reading these statements by her.
I mean, her and Richard Dawkins, for the context, were butting heads over this. Not over 9/11.
Well, over different views on evolutionary biology.
Exactly.
And then potentially also 9/11. Yeah, as we were saying, what all this comes down to is there are 3-minute still shots of a flower in this fucking movie.
Yeah, but that's not as fun to talk about. Okay, let's get into the other part of this discussion that Mark Fisher brings up. Because why does he bring up that? It's to argue for what we, as a leftist political consciousness, need to get in touch with the way in which the relation between nature and civilization played into revolutionary movements in the past, and that we should kind of recapture that revolutionary spirit that might have been felt by somebody who was bludgeoned by a police officer's baton when looking at a landscape. And here we're looking at a landscape in documentary form, and he's...
And literally, yeah, this guy goes to a place and it's like, this is where farmers worked. That's Marxist.
And he's meditating on what does the landscape mean?
Yeah.
What's the revolutionary potentiality that has been taken away from it? Why has it been taken from it? Each individual like rock and each individual like plot of land has like this, I'm sure, fascinating history.
Are you wondering if he says the word enclosure movement in the movie? Yes, he does.
Mark Fisher weaves into an argument that he has in his mind. He has an argument in his mind.
I mean, to be clear, this movie does use the word Marx like
a lot.
3 times a minute.
No, but Mark Fisher is arguing against the speculative realists.
Right.
And the OOOs.
Object-oriented ontology. Don't worry, I also barely know what it means, and also I'm pretty sure Steve barely knows what it means.
But Mark Fisher brings them up.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's all associated with Nick Land, and anti-anthropocentrism are the things I know about it.
The emphasis on extinction means that the concerns of Robinson and Ruins rhyme with the preoccupations that have emerged in speculative realist philosophy, which has focused on the spaces prior to, beyond, and after human life. In some respects, the work of philosophers such as Ray Brazier and Tim Morton restages the old confrontation between human finitude and the sublime, which was the former subject of a certain kind of landscape art. But where the older sublime concentrated on local natural phenomena such as the ocean or volcanic eruption, which could overwhelm and destroy the individual organism or whole cities, speculative realism contemplates the extinction not only of the human world, but of life and indeed matter itself. The prospect of catastrophe means the disjunction between the lived time of human experience and longer durations, not just a question of metaphysical contemplation, but a matter of urgent political concern. What do you make of this argument he's having? Because I see this as a meta argument he's having against these kind of trendy philosophies.
Right, but is he contending that these philosophies are, like, is he arguing against the movie? Is he contending that these philosophies are baked into the film? Or, because aren't the people, like, named as influences those people? Like,
no, not on the film.
Oh, okay.
He's saying that the emphasis on extinction rhymes with the preoccupations with these philosophies.
Right. This anti-anthropocentrism.
And I think what he's saying is that in order for a kind of leftist movement to gain resurgence again, we need to occupy this the spatial arguments of ecological questions.
Yeah, versus this anti-humanist nihilism of
right, which Ray Brazier, for those that don't know, is a pretty influential nihilist philosopher.
I think pessimist is the more technically correct.
He wrote a thing called Nihil. Like,
yeah, but even that is like sort of, from the very brief summary, it just sounded like I'm gonna do Nietzsche but cooler and more modern or more postmodern.
Well, yeah, he's the if you've seen True Detective, the guy from True Detective said that this guy is an influence on that, so there's another trace.
Like, there's very much a like sense of, I'm going to say that we should be cool with our own annihilation, but like different than the way Nietzsche said that. Like, we should be cool with the eventuality of no life whatsoever, not even no human life. And, like, that is part of the thing that we should embrace. And Heidegger was wrong because for all his fucking talk, he was essentially just trying to stave off this fear of death, whereas I'm fully embracing it. I don't know. Doesn't sound interesting to me, but, you know, if I was like,
a grad student that was studying.
Yeah, or a high school kid from Ohio who, like, listened to a bunch of fucking emo and shit. Like, yeah, maybe.
What about Tim Morton? Tim Morton is the OOO guy, the object-oriented ontology.
I'm not entirely...
He came up with the idea of hyperobjects and cited Bjork and one specific video that she made, which is like robots...
Everything is love?
No. The hyper ballad, which is another kind of like philosophy that tries to get away from human-centered.
Right. And then famously Nick Land approaches it by saying, like, what if Terminator is real and that's also a good thing?
Which is also similar to Bjork. I imagine Bjork read Nick Land and said, let me make a music video with some...
Just imagining Bjork reading Nick Land today and coming up with cool ideas.
All right, for the listener, what is Nick Land's general...
Nick Land is a speedhead who used to be Mark Fisher's philosopher, and then he got into racism.
Mark Fisher's philosopher?
Or Mark Fisher's teacher.
Rival.
Professor.
Oh, I thought they were in the same school together.
I mean, he was like the professor leader of the CCRU while Mark Fisher was one of the students. When they say Nick Land got fired from Warwick for doing a bunch of drugs with his students, Mark Fisher was one of those students. That's their history together. And then, like, Nick Land got, like, super racist and, like, reactionary, and, like, Mark Fisher, like, stayed the left-wing, vaguely Marxist, post-Marxist, whatever the fuck. And, I don't know, he occasionally sparred with him through the great dialectic of writing shit on blogs. But,
which Brazier hates.
Yeah,
Brazier hates sparring on blogs. And the term speculative realism.
Whatever, dude. I don't give a shit about your fucking, like, weird ass, like, oh, what if death is good? Fucking bullshit. Fuck you, little bitch.
What if death is good? So, to, I guess, finish out this chapter and finish out this book, because this is the last chapter and this is the end of our first season. What did we learn about hauntology? What did we learn about Mark Fisher's philosophy? What have you learned from the last season?
I don't know. It's a good book. You should read it. Although, I don't know. I fucking spent like 20-some hours talking about this shit. Fuck you. Like, just listen to the thing. I think,
Well, that's Marlo punting the football on what you should take away from this. I think you should take away that hauntology is a very interesting concept that people should think about when they think about leftist politics, especially in regards to cultural artifacts. When you listen to music, when you think about mental health as depicted in capitalist media, you should possibly think about the way in which we don't need that. We don't have to be sad. We don't have to be depressed, and that there are forces which keep us depressed and keep us constantly reimagining futures that never came to be. And part of it is the music that we listen to, part of it is the ideology that's behind it, part of it are the way in which the places that we go to have been taken over by Starbucks or whatever the fuck he's mad at. Mark Fisher's always mad at Starbucks and always mad at corporate chains, because they are emblematic of things that capitalists have taken away from you and that capitalists continue to take away from their workers, which is their time, their surplus enjoyment that they should be enjoying instead of working at their jobs. The public places in which you can go to enjoy in your off time. I recently went to a place expecting to have lots of public enjoyment of nature in the woods, and all I got was giant fucking privatized houses and general enclosed spaces that are cut off from the public, which is a tragedy, and one that are directly responsible by the people that are in political power and the political power that shapes the culture around it. And I think that pretty much summarizes my thoughts on Ghosts of My Life.
Yep. Good book. This episode is brought to you by Better Health. Do you want to get therapy, but like the thought of having to take time off work makes you sad and then you don't do your job as well, but then you need the therapy to do your job good? Now you can text a guy and pay money for it. Better Help. Yeah, no, hauntology is an entirely useful political framework to view contemporary 21st century Marxism in...
I think political and cultural kind of context, I think, really illuminated throughout this.
Hambone, or whoever the fuck that blues singer was pretty good.
Hambone?
Axeman.
Yeah, Axe.
Yeah, his... and...
I like David Peace. The 1974, 1979, 1980. Maybe you'd like to go back and watch the other ones. I really enjoyed Life on Mars, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I know you didn't.
Wait. Life on Mars was that one that sucked.
Well, I liked the using that as a
okay.
As
Life on Mars sucked ass.
As a description for
rest in peace, Mark Fisher. You would have loved Steve's takeaway from your book. I liked Life on Mars.
No, I like using Life on Mars as a, I like the past as an alien planet. I think that's a great description of watching period pieces. That's great. I liked going through The Shining. That was a fun fucking
that was fun.
Movie and venture. What a wacky essay
Inception,
that
was fun.
Inception, great discussion. We got to talk about Drake, Kanye West, and pop music.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, no, we had a good time.
Hope you liked the fucking podcast, nerds.
Yeah, we'll see you next season for our very exciting capitalist realism, which we started looking up, researching. Marlo's read the book like 30 fucking times.
Yeah.
So
Gonna breeze through this bitch. This was our homework. Next shit, we were phoning this bitch in. All right.
all right.
See ya.